Real Madrid. The season hasn't gone as expected, has it? Well, at least for me. Let's rewind to the end of last season. They won La Liga by a commanding 10 points. And of course, the Champions League, they won it yet again. We saw Vini take a step towards superstardom. They were unbelievable. And then in the off-season, who did they add? Kylian Mbappe. Are you kidding me? This led to us having such high expectations for this season. So much promise. Another La Liga, another Champions League, maybe a treble? But no, it hasn't turned out that way at all. I mean, let's go through the events of this season so far. They lost the Copa to Barca, which by the way is their third loss to them this season alone. In La Liga, it's not done, but let's be real, Barca are heavy favourites. And then in the Champions League, they were cleanly, to be honest here, easily put away by Arsenal, 5-1. So how did we get here? A Champions League, La Liga winning side adding Kylian Mbappe, what some would say the best player in the world. Yet it's a season to forget. Well, that's what we're going to try and answer today. In the 2024-25 season, where did it go wrong for Real Madrid? Now, when answering that question, for many there's an obvious answer. You all know who I'm talking about. Pointing the finger at Kylian Mbappe. And it makes sense why, he's an easy target. Last season, without you, they won the Champions League and La Liga. But now with you this season, most likely they'll go trophyless. So that's on you. But to me, I think that's unfair. It's not that simple. Although, why don't we entertain that opinion? Let's evaluate Mbappe's season and his effect on this team. Starting off with the numbers. Still some games left to go, but he's currently at 51 games with 35 goals. And that in itself is fantastic. Although he does have 4 assists, making it 39 goals and assists. But either way, those numbers are really good. At least good enough to get you a La Liga, a Copa del Rey, a Champions League. But here's the thing, how does Mbappe affect his teammates? And with that, I want to now look at the numbers of Vinicius, Rodrigo and Bellingham last season compared to this season. And here they are. You'll notice straight away that all 3 of them were more prolific last season. Bellingham was significantly more prolific with 10 more goals, with 5 less games. Same with Vini, only 5 more goals sure, but in 9 less games. When it comes to goals and assists, Vini is worse off by 3, Rodrigo by 4, Bellingham by 9. But is it fair to say that's on Mbappe? I'm not so sure. To be honest, the only one here that I feel is truly suffering from Mbappe's presence is Rodrigo. With Mbappe now on the side, Rodrigo gets far less chances. You can see here he's averaging far less shots per 90, although I do think this is a good trade-off. Rodrigo is suffering, sure, but in turn it's helping Mbappe to get on the ball more, have more chances himself. And with all due respect, you are always going to prioritize Mbappe over Rodrigo. He's on a different level. Can't argue with that. And the prioritization of Mbappe over Rodrigo is not why I think they've had a bad season. Now, what about Bellingham? You all just saw he's far less prolific in front of goal this season. Like Rodrigo, is that due to less shots, less chances? No. You can see right here, shots per 90 both seasons and his XG. Yes, it's a bit better last season, but it's a very minimal difference. Essentially all the same. And here you can see his heat map from last season compared to this season. Once again, very similar. Bellingham is still playing the way he was last season. The issue for me with Bellingham is very simple. He's just having a down year. Look, he is a great player, world class, but he's not flawless. He's been far less consistent and most importantly, far less clutch. Last year in the Champions League, in the forward line, Vini took center stage, but in La Liga, it was Bellingham. He was the guy. He came through again and again and again. But this year, that hasn't been the case, and to me, not because of Mbappe, but because he, and this happens a lot in football, is having a down year. And I also echo that thought with Vini. Look, just watching those two play with my eyes, there's clearly some sort of lack of cohesion between them. They're not as in sync as you'd want them to be. But yet again, I feel that's unfair to put it on Mbappe. It should be noted, Mbappe is playing out of position. He wants to be out on the left, but no, they allowed Vini to retain his position. Mbappe is the one compromising here. Look, I'm not saying that Mbappe is free of criticism, not at all. He is a factor in this, but so is Jude, Vinicius, Rodrigo, and everyone else in this side. Although to me, the biggest factor in answering the question why things have gone so wrong for Real Madrid this season, there's one clear and obvious answer. But before we get to that, let's look at their injuries, their absences on the defensive side, because this for sure also must play somewhat of a part. Let's go through the list real quick. Eder Militao has missed 40 games this season, Carvajal 46, Camavinga 23, Mendy 26, and finally Alaba 43. I don't care who you are, you could be Barca 2011, Brazil 1970, you have these kind of injuries to your defense, you're gonna take a hit. Although I will say this, due to these injuries, we've seen Raul Asensio come into the side, and he's been fantastic. In fact, I'll be honest here, even if Militao comes back healthy, I still think you should potentially start Asensio. And also, when it comes to the injury of Carvajal, meaning either Vazquez or unfortunately Valverde has to play that role, you could have prepared better for that. Carvajal is an old man. This kind of thing is expected, yet you had no replacement. What are you doing? Well, either way, yes, this must play a factor, but it still to me isn't the biggest factor. Like I mentioned before, there's one clear and obvious answer. This is all down to the absence of Toni Kroos. He retired and they didn't, or at least couldn't, replace him. Let's first talk about what Kroos brings to the table. Firstly, he's an elite passer, high volume, high accuracy passer, and not because he plays it safe with sideways passes. No, he creates chances, he takes risks, but it's still pinpoint. He's also very composed in midfield, can beat the press and makes the right choices 9 times out of 10, and plays the game at his own pace, bends it to his will. These are just some of his attributes, but in them they help the defense, they help the offense, they help the team greatly. And there's 2 more traits I want to bring up, something that Real have struggled with a lot this season: consistency and rising to the moment. 9 times out of 10, Kroos will be Kroos. He'll be fantastic either against Barcelona or Valladolid. And I can't express enough, amongst the forward line and the midfield, those 2 traits in particular have really costed Real this season. But let's talk about how they've tried to overcome the absence of Kroos this season. Firstly, Luka Modric. And even in his prime, Modric's style is different to Kroos. He brings something else to the table. And now with his age, it gets even worse. You can't ask him of that. We did see particularly Tchouaméni and Ceballos get a lot more minutes this season. And whilst I do rate those 2, especially Tchouaméni, they are not Toni Kroos. With Tchouaméni, they gave him more responsibility this season. Not just to be a number 6, but also move into the number 8 at times. And yeah, it didn't really work out. With Ceballos, I like the guy, but once again, you are not, with all due respect, will never be Toni Kroos. He tried and at times did well, but could not fulfill that role, particularly consistently. What about Valverde? Once again, he has a different role in the side and also was busy covering for Carvajal. And the same goes for Camavinga. So yeah, Kroos retired, he left the void and they could not fill that void. You can't understate just how much he brought to that Real Madrid side. In beating the press, slowing down the game to his preference, it greatly helped the defense. And with his passing, his decision making, his vision, his accuracy, greatly helped the offense. I don't think it's a coincidence that in their 3 biggest games this season, firstly the Copa del Rey final, Barca bossed their midfield, and then in the Champions League quarterfinal, Declan Rice both home and away was the man of the match. That's not a coincidence. Look, they dealt with a lot of injuries on the defensive side. That's a factor. Also, Mbappe, Vini, Rodrigo and Bellingham and a few others, particularly in the biggest moments this season, fell short. That is also a factor. But to me, the biggest factor in answering the question why things went so wrong for Real Madrid this season, they never replaced Toni Kroos. And the question is now, how does newly appointed Xabi Alonso and co actually go about doing that? Do they put their trust again in Ceballos or Tchouaméni? For me, no. With Tchouaméni, he's not that kind of player. He has a different role. With Ceballos, like I said before, I don't think he'll be good enough, unfortunately. There's also rumors of potentially Arda Güler stepping into that role, which, by the way, I don't like. And I hate the idea of Trent stepping into that role. No. To me, what they need to do is head into the market. That's where they'll find a replacement, or at least try to find it. Because let's be real, can you ever really replace Toni Kroos? Because if you can't, then the solution might actually be to adapt. Completely change how your midfield operates. Something for Xabi to think about. But look, to sum up on their future, I believe Xabi Alonso is inheriting a very strong squad, which needs a few minor tweaks and yes, someone to fill in that Toni Kroos shaped hole. Or like how I just mentioned, an overhaul on how their midfield operates. They still have superstars. Mbappe is a superstar, Vini is a superstar, Valverde and more. They're not in need of a full rebuild, no. With those adjustments, then they can easily get themselves back at the top. If not, then I think it'll be yet again another tough season. And there's the video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts. What do you think is the biggest factor to Real Madrid's downfall this season? Like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more. I am the football enthusiast, and as always, take care of yourselves.